Hello, everyone. How are you? I invite Lee, your Tai Chi examiner. And there is a burning question on my mind for a long, long time. Yes. And I started my journey of Tai Chi and Qigong more than 20 years ago. And but I was already not very young. and But I started in learning it as more like an exercise. And until I met my teacher, Grandmaster Chen Zhenwei, then I start to understand the profundity and the richness of Tai Chi Chuan. And but at that time, and nobody really talked about Tai Chi as Qigong. And through my job as your examiner, I interview a lot of great individuals in this international healing art. And one of the person I had the privilege to interview is Dr. Roger Yanka. And in many ways, Dr. Roger Yanka, he was on the forefront of this mind-body exercise. And then nowadays, there are so many people talk about mind-body exercise. And when we speaking of the healing art of Tai Chi Qigong, and then and people sometimes confuse about what they are and what's the differences. And I think Dr. Yanka probably is the best person to help us and then to understand this art. And let me bring Dr. Yanka into our studio. And, very good. And this will take a little while for Zoom to actually does its own magic. Hello, Dr. Yanka, how are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much and wishing you well. And hello to everyone who's listening.
Well, Dr. Yanka, and for some of you, he is a Chinese medicine doctor. And you see, way back, and then when a lot of people did not understand acupuncture and Chinese medicine, you were already practicing the Chinese medicine. And I remember the beautiful story you were telling me about how you got into it. And that because first you wanted to become a doctor because you want to save somebody, including your family, right? But then you find out you studied the Western medicine, and but you found out the Western medicine is only helping people when they get sick, right? So you say you don't want to be a doctor of sickness. You want to be a doctor of wellness. And then so you study Chinese medicine and became one. But then it's really interesting thing is later on you decided, how about I just teach them how to keep themselves healthy instead of coming to see me, right? And so you went to China, you studied Tai Chi and Qigong and so forth, and then you came back, and then you taught I don't know worldwide now. How many have you taught? Thousands and tens of thousands, right? Yeah, and then you also have trained a lot of people to become instructors and to teach your method. And then also you were the first one to crack the door open at veterans and the VA hospitals. And I learned from the National Qigong Association, and they say they are doing some program and to help to train people and to become instructor and to help our veterans. So you really have been on the how should I say, the front, and you're the pioneer in this field. So I think it will be great if you can help us to understand and about all these mind-body practices and what's the difference between the Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Qigong, and Wushu and so forth. And so,
Yes, 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 yes,
okay,
yes.
well,
What a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you again and again, Violet. We've had a long time relationship, and we're always putting our heads and our hearts together to imagine how to support people in understanding the value of all the mind-body practices, including yoga and all of the ones from China, as you just described. Going back to the question of why would a successful clinician of Chinese medicine stop the practice and change direction to teaching citizens Qigong and Tai Chi and even Kung Fu, um, and even further back to what was the motive, my motive for wanting to be a doctor in the first place. So let's start there. And it's very simple. And I want people to really super pay attention to this one idea. And that is, where do you get the best medicine? And um, in the last 100 years or so, in the European nations, um, we've fallen for the idea that medicine is something that you get from somewhere. And however, in Chinese medicine, or the foundational original ideas that go all the way back into the origins of shamanic tribes in China, is that the human has the capacity to generate greater functional, uh, whatever you want to call that, to personally increase functional capacity. Well, what does that mean? That means to do whatever we can to enhance the medicine that is naturally produced within our own being without having to have a disease, go to a doctor, need a medical procedure, or have be prescribed pharmaceuticals. What can we do at home for no cost? So now think to yourself, do we live in a culture that's experiencing medical, economic distress? Well, yes, of course. It turns out that the United States is actually the sickest country in the world.
yes, and we
And
spend most of our GDP on healthcare.
that's
Yeah,
right. And so
very, very true.
we spend more than every other country, and we have the lowest level of well-being. Now, as a citizen, I'm going to just say, as someone who's kind of patriotic, I want to live in the healthiest country in the world. I want to live in the country that has the most sophisticated health care system. And I don't mean medical financing system. I mean literally caring for health system that starts, as I was saying a moment ago, with turning on the most profound medicine ever developed by the human race within our own being without having to leave our home.
Well,
Listen.
Dr. Jahnke, yeah, you this really reminds me your best-selling book, and it's Healing Within, right? Or Healer Within, and
The healer
that
within, yes.
yeah, the Healer Within, and then so if anyone out there listening and watching this video, and you haven't read the book, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much. So then let's keep going, because as the ancient societies, it happened in India with yoga, it happens in all of the African societies and the South American societies and the Native American societies, the Hawaiian indigenous people, the Australian indigenous people, all of them have what we can call uh, interactive practices that require the interactivity of mental focus and body activity, and usually with some breath modification. So, body practice, breath practice, and mind practice woven together. Now, how do all these different cultures do that? There's two different ways that they do it. One is they do it as ritual when they're celebrating. They dance, like thousands of years ago when they discovered fire, and they'd all sit around the fire and celebrate the new moon, the full moon, the equinox, all that stuff. They do dances of their community. Then, in addition to that, typically they have some kind of meditation tradition, and they have, because of the necessity of survival, they have warriors and hunters. And so, in the Chinese society, how this all kind of blossoms as the Chinese society is proliferating into one of the most populous countries in the world, the meditation portion becomes a very, very quiescent, a beautiful, beautiful word. Quiescence means to focus on the present moment, deepen your breath, adjust your posture. Maybe you do some kind of hand gestures. You might be sitting, you might be standing. Call that meditation if you want to, or you could call that Qigong. And then on the very far other side, so on this side, it's stillness. And on the other side, it's dynamic movement. And the most dynamic movement in the Chinese culture is Gong Fu, sometimes called Wushu, and other times expressed as gymnastics. And, when I've been to China, well, I've been to China like 10 times. Probably half of those times we went somewhere to what's called the Chinese gymnastic show, which is amazing. What people can learn to do. And also Kung Fu ends up in Chinese opera. So we have everything from sitting still, standing still, and I'm building a spectrum here. We have sitting still, standing still, moving gently, but not dynamically, and then all the way over to different levels of Kung Fu, from Kung Fu for personal development all the way to Kung Fu to join the army or become a Kung Fu movie star or go into the police or go into gymnastics and opera. So everywhere from stillness to dynamic movement. So now in the Chinese idea or framework, stillness is associated with calm, quiet, relax. And dynamic movement is associated with quick, even strenuous. So you can see there's an entire spectrum here. The stillness side is typically associated with one of these beautiful Chinese concepts from philosophy and medicine called yin. Activity is a beautiful word associated with Chinese medicine and philosophy called yang. So if you take the yang portion and you put it into a direct relationship with the yin portion, bring it to the center, you get that one right there. The balance of yin and yang, which is called Tai Chi. So when people ask the question, I'm confused about all these different kinds of health and mind-body practices from China, one of the ways that we can talk about it is that on one side, it's more calm. On the other side, it's more dynamic. And when you bring the calm and the dynamic together, you get something called Tai Chi, which is a balance of yin and yang. And that's what the Tai Chi symbol actually means. So then let's go very briefly, and then I'll back to you, and you can we can mine this in any way you want to. What are the applications? And in what way, I'm very interested in what way the applications solve medical problems or prevent medical problems. On the other hand, what we could say is these practices are not only solving potential medical problems, but they are preventing medical problems. And then if we go to the social side of things, typically people learn these things in groups. And so now we have a social opportunity for people of shared values. Anybody who comes to a Tai Chi or a Qigong or a Gong Fu class, they have shared values. So now you're in a group of other citizens who have shared values. And then finally, is there something about economics? So, in other words, heal disease, prevent disease, create social opportunities, and solve economic problems. So, if we live in a culture, let's start with the economic side, and we'll go all the way to the prevention, disease healing side. If we have a challenge with our economics in any nation, what can we do to, as a citizen, besides marching in the street, voting, shouting at each other, what can we do to actually make a contribution to the financial and economic solvency of that nation? Well, we cannot need medicine. And we can be an exemplar of a well person. How do you become an exemplar of a well person? By having some kind of a physical practice, which can include Kung Fu as a strenuous exercise, or Tai Chi as a gentle exercise, or even Qigong as a very mild type of exercise. All three of them turn on the medicine within. So, how powerful is that economically? Then let's go socially. One of the things that we have a problem with in almost every society in the world is that people don't, they become isolated because of social and political challenges. We're living in a time when people who used to be friends aren't anymore because of the fact that they're arguing about their political views. Well, what if they were both just taking care of their health and could share that as the focus of their conversation? That would be incredibly powerful. Qigong, Tai Chi, Kung Fu, Wushu, they all provide opportunities for people to get together and have something other than politics to shout at each other about or to agree on or whatever. So now let's go to well-being. Wouldn't it be better if people would let themselves learn more about how much they can do for themselves, how powerful they are? And then they can say, well, but wait a minute, I'll just wait, I'll get sick, I'll go to the doctor's office, they'll give me a medicine. So I ask this question: would you rather spend a little time every day doing something like Qigong and Tai Chi, or would you rather go and sit in a doctor's office and then have to go and sit in a pharmacy while you wait for them to make your medicine, or at worst, get into a surgical or procedure where you actually have to undergo the risk of going to a hospital? Most doctors who have any sort of social wisdom will tell you that the hospital is among the most dangerous places in
Mhm.
any community. So why would we do that when we have a medicine within us? So that's the money, the society, and then the well-being. And then let's go to the healing. When a person is sick and they are experiencing any kind of pharmaceutical or surgical intervention, what is it that we can do to accelerate the healing process? The answer is what is called prohab and rehab. So rehab, everybody knows what rehabilitation is. It's how I can get back into the action after I have a surgical procedure. But hardly anybody knows what prohab is. Prohab means to get ready for a surgical procedure by understanding breath practice, body movement, postural adjustment, self-applied massage, so that as soon I learn before I go into surgery what I'm going to do as soon as I come out of surgery. Because if you haven't learned prehab or prohab, then you have to wait to do rehab until you've recovered enough to be able to do rehab. But if you do prehab, then you know the very moment that you come out from under the anesthesia, you're already poised and informed and ready to go with adjusting your breath and adjusting your posture and doing gentle movements and so forth, because all of that is circulating the blood and discharging the negative effects of the anesthesia and then activating the healing resources.
Oh
So,
my
what do you?
God, I did not even think about that way, and that's amazing. Yeah, I the ProHab and excellent. Mhm.
So where? All right. So let me just.
Sorry for interrupting you,
Oh no,
but
no. That's
I
I
just
was.
could not help. I just like this is so great. Yeah.
So then let's form the next. Let's form the next question. Um, you and I have had many discussions, and I think that you and I share our compassion and our commitment for the people in our society who don't understand how to enter in to any of these practices. And and so perhaps we could talk. Let's see. Let's just talk. I'll ask you a question, and then you can
My
say a
God.
little something, and then I'll say something back. Is what do you think is the most important thing that can happen anywhere in the world, in any context, or through any medium that can help people who are curious about being more well, but are but struggle to understand the realm of qigong and tai chi and kung fu? Uh, what could happen to make it easier for people to understand that? What is your thought about that?
That's a very very big question. I don't know if I really know the answer, but while you were talking previously, it's excellent. I'm Chinese, right? But you made this Chinese healing us sounds so easy to understand, and from the different spectrum, and that's I think you just have that incredible ability to explain very complicated things easy. Maybe that's why you called your how should I say the healing art Tai Chi easy, and we can talk about that a little bit later. And yeah,
Sure.
definitely that helped me to see things. And you also talking about how when people are practicing together, and then so a lot of time they put a lot of differences aside. And then that this reminds me of the World Tai Chi Day, and people around the country. It doesn't matter the religious background or the political agendas they have whatsoever, and they all practice Tai Chi. So that's another beautiful thing, right? And back to your question, you know what I'm not so sure I have the answer. How about you? Can you help me with this
Sure.
this
I'll
question?
actually, I'll tell you the two things that popped to my mind. The first one
Okay.
is to have as many discussions like the one that we are having right now happen. And so yourself as what typically these days we call an influencer, and myself as someone who has a certain amount of expertise, shall we say. But then how interesting is it that when the expert makes it so simple that average people don't have to be nervous about just getting started somewhere, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to go back to the media. So everyone is watching some kind of television, and everyone is scrolling around on their phone or their computer. And so every opportunity that someone has to land on the web page or the YouTube page that we are now on, speaking to whomever we're speaking to, that is huge. So in other words, telling stories and stating and restating and refining and saying it again and noticing that different people say it in different ways. And by the way, when we hear people say things about Qigong, Tai Chi, and Kung Fu, and they say things in different ways, like some people say, well, if you don't do this, then you're not doing Tai Chi. And then there's someone over here that says, I don't care if you do that. Anything that you do that calms you down and moves your body slowly is a beautiful Tai Chi, even if you're doing it not as well as your teacher would wish you would. So, are both of those right answers, or is one wrong? The person over here who has a very traditional background would say, well, you have to do this. And this person over here says, you don't have to do that at all. You can do it this or that, or you can even make something up. And so then average people will say, well, I have to choose a side. I have to choose a side. I have to go with the person who has strong rules, or I have to go with the person who's more freeform. And what I would say is, why not just do it all? Put yourself into a relationship with someone who is very traditional and has shall we say, an explicit idea about how you, here, I'm going to use these now, should do the practice, and then head on over here and have an experience of people who have learned to teach Tai Chi classes or Qigong classes in a context where it's kind of open and more social, and we say easy, accessible, and fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this media is very important, and I want to celebrate you for all the writing and publishing and now podcasting that you're doing. I think that's just absolutely fantastic. Then the second thing that I think is important is to open a gateway, open a wide gateway, so that some of the people who want to get very explicit can come in through that gate. And some of the people who really need it to be easy, accessible, and fun can come in through that gate. And then once you're into the territory of what we would call Qi cultivation practices, or what Western medicine would call functional maximization practices, once you're in there, then you can try things out. It's like going to an amusement park. And so now I'm going to go to Violet's beautiful class. Or now I'm going to go to Dr. Jahnke's interesting class. And just I'm going to go to this website, and I'm going to go to that website, and I'm going to go on YouTube, and I'm going to look up traditional Tai Chi, and then I'm going to look up Tai Chi, modified Tai Chi. And so those two things, the media plus a wider gateway, I think is probably the things that are needed. Like a lot of people say, you need legislation. No. Why would we spend our time in hearings and trying to get the attention of senators and congressmen who are all being paid by the pharmaceutical industry anyway? Why would we spend our time on those people? Just do the practice, make friends with people who do the practice, have fun doing the practice. That is a political statement. Back to you.
Very, very good. Yes, I think it is very important people start trying it. And I'm also feel excited about the current time in terms of, and I was thinking about like 10 years ago, very few people knew about the Qigong. And 5 years ago, and more people, and they asked and they're curious about it. And now and guess what? And a lot of gyms and fitness studios, they were specifically asking for Qigong exercise, then Tai Chi. So that's why I say, I feel good about the current situation because the wellness is much higher than before. But definitely, you and I still have a job to do, and you definitely have done a lot. And with your writing, with your teaching, and with the style you created. And I don't know if a style is the right way to call Tai Chi easy or not. How would you call you don't call it as not a form, right? Not a style. What would you call it?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't think that we've reached a point in the development of all these things to be able to actually, pin a definition and then have that stick. But we can do is have a little discussion about it. And I'm going to reflect back. I don't know if you were there or not, but a number of years ago, there was a big Tai Chi conference at Vanderbilt University.
Yes, I was there. The first international Tai Chi symposium
Yes,
hosted by
yes,
the
yes.
Young Family Tai Chi Chuan Association.
So one of the absolutely historic things that happened right around that time was that in the past, the Chen family and the Yang family and the Sun family and the Wu family and the Hao family and all the other families would basically sort of argue the point of like who has the best Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
But at that event, all of those families came together. And,
Yes, all
and
5 lineage holders were there. Mm-hmm.
correct. And one of the things that they did as a part of commemorating that very profound historic moment was that they all agreed to create a version of their Tai Chi with 16 parts.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just remind people that very traditional Tai Chi is typically many parts. Some
Mm-hmm.
people like to say 108 movements. So that's what we would call traditional long form Tai Chi. Then, uh, before this event at Vanderbilt, many of the families created shorter forms to basically help because the long forms were really isolated in elite families and not usually available to peasants. And so they made shorter forms, and those shorter forms are sometimes 38, sometimes 32, sometimes 24, and those are called short forms.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything less than a short form, typically in the sort of, shall we say, the scholarly framework of the world of Tai Chi, is called a modified form. And so anything below 24 is what we would call modified Tai Chi. So what we know right away is that all 5 families, traditional families from China, created a modified form.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting in itself because typically or traditionally we would say like if you're not doing the long form then you're not really doing Tai Chi, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of offensive actually. But there are many people who do the long form, and I have done the long form thousands of times in my life, and you probably have too. So then here's the other. So besides every one of them creating a modified form, for contemporary society, the oldest member of the Yang family took the stage and gave a lecture. Many of us gave lectures at that event. I was reporting on some research that we were doing. And the elder Yang said, you know, if you don't have time to do the 108, well, then do the 24. And if you don't have time to do the 24, then do the 16. And if you don't have time to do the 16, then just choose among your favorite movements and do one or two and repeat them for as long as you have.
That's so Grandmaster, late Grandmaster Yang Zhenduo.
Yeah. That's the guy at the top of the pile.
Yeah.
The elder statesman of the Yang family.
Yes.
And by the way, the Chen family didn't throw up their hand and say, no, you can't do that. And so what I learned from that, and that leads to one other thing I'll say about this. What I learned from that was that the wisdom that is in the philosophy of Chinese medicine and Taoism and Buddhism and Confucianism from China was pressing on the inconvenience of long form Tai Chi. And when the wisdom comes into a relationship with something that's inconvenient and complex, to be able to help people, it makes good sense. And so all the families got together and they made good sense. And then one of them actually stood up in front of an entire audience and declared that if you just do one Tai Chi movement and repeat it, that's better than not doing anything at all. So now let's ask the question, when you do some kind of Chinese exercise gesture more than once, what is that called? It's Qigong. So that was basically the elder Yang saying that the Tai Chi can be a kind of Qigong, and then he recommended it. So right around that same time, we convened, myself and the University of Chicago, National Council on Aging, the Veterans Administration, the YMCA, and a bunch of researchers and traditional Chinese Tai Chi teachers got together for what was called the National Expert Meeting on Qigong and Tai Chi. And we actually wrote a report, what's called a consensus report. And what a consensus report is it's everything from a large meeting that everyone agreed on. That's what consensus is. And all the things that people didn't agree on are not in the consensus report. And so the main question was, is it fair to make Tai Chi easy? Is it fair socially and culturally? In other words, would that be seen as, shall we say, attacking traditional Chinese culture? Or would that actually contribute to the benefit of these cultural activities by making them more accessible? The consensus report, which is the reporting of what everybody in that meeting agreed upon, the researchers, the traditional teachers, the policymakers, and so forth, the scholars, the finding was, yes, making Tai Chi easy is a good idea for every culture in the world because it'll support the proliferation of this very powerful health maximizing exercise. So I don't remember the question we're answering, but and then
no,
you said,
yeah, I was asking about Tai Chi easy. Your Tai Chi easy, how would you classify that? And by the way, you created even before 2009 when the Vanderbilt conference was, right? So you really had a vision, and
I did.
that's amazing. You Yeah, you really see through everything very clearly, and that's why you are able to create something.
Well,
Wow.
allow me to say that I used to try to teach traditional Tai Chi, and I was working at the YMCA here in my community, and we would put up a sign that says Tai Chi class, and like 100 people would come. And then once we got going, teaching in the traditional sort of way, uh, the next class would have, instead of 100 people, it would have like maybe 50. And then we get in a little deeper, and now the next time we're down to 25. And so because I have such a reverence for uh, every cultural tradition, I definitely felt, mixed. Do we want to make this more accessible so people can actually benefit? Or do we want to just run classes and have hundreds of people come and then have them end up like, I think maybe out of those 100 people, maybe 3 people learned the short form. We were just doing the 24 form. So, out of reverence for the traditions, instead of just excising a chunk of either the Chen style or the Yang style or the Wu style or the Sun style or the Hao style, which I'm not that familiar with, what we did was we took 5, just the tiniest little bit of Tai Chi, 5 times what Elder Yang said you could do and
Mhm.
benefit, and asked the question, are all the principles, all the important health maximizing principles of Tai Chi contained in 5 movements? And the answer was yes. So then we went on to say, well, what are some of the movements that appear in all of the family forms? So, in other words, we're not just making Yang Tai Chi easy or Chen Tai Chi easy or Sun or Wu Tai Chi easy. We're making Tai Chi easy. And when people see the gestures, when they do cloud hands, maybe their hand passes with their palm facing and then turns away. But it's also very possible that when their hand passes, it turns away right away.
Mhm.
And so then you ask the question, which one is right and which one is wrong? And the answer is neither are wrong. And therefore, you learn the basic idea of doing 5 movement Tai Chi, and then you personalize it. So many Chen teachers learn Tai Chi easy and they personalize it to, we do this one and we do this one, and different people call it different, different things, and we do this one. So different families name those movements with different names, but the essence of the gesture is the same, and the Tai Chi principles are included in the gesture, which is posture, breath, mind, relax,
Mhm.
sink, rise, expand, etc. So
Mhm.
it's intended to be principle based Tai Chi made easy.
Excellent. Isn't that amazing what Dr. Jahnke just shared with us? I have always have a great respect for him, not only because he is a pioneer among the first to learn and practice traditional Chinese medicine in the US, but also because of his remarkable contributions to the field. He was one of the first to teach the healing of Tai Chi and Qigong, authoring the insightful book, The Healer Within, which teaches people how to use traditional Chinese medicine techniques to activate their body's own healing abilities. He has collaborated with scientists to find out the efficacy of integration medicines, introduce Tai Chi to the Veterans Administration, and create Tai Chi easy to make the healing art accessible to all. Beyond his amazing achievements, I deeply admire his profound knowledge of the essence of Tai Chi and Qigong and his ability to explain its complexity in plain English, making it easy for everyone to understand. I have so many more questions I would love to ask Dr. Jahnke, but unfortunately, we are out of time. So I look forward to inviting him back to share more of his wisdoms with us. So stay tuned and keep watching my YouTube videos and reading my articles at www.violettaichi.com. Thank you.